I was manipulated by my wife and her identical twin sister. I didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. I can't even wrap my head around this right now. Everything is such a mess. My name's Luke, I'm 24, and my wife, Ashley, who's 23, has an identical twin sister, Amber. From the start, they've always been inseparably close, and I chalked it up to the whole twin dynamic. I've had a couple of twin friends before, so I figured their bond was normal, maybe even stronger since they're identical. To give you some backstory, I met Ashley about 2 years ago. I was bartending at this joint my uncle owns, and she walked in one night. From the moment we started talking, it was like magic, we just clicked. In fact, she's the one who asked me out. Everything happened so fast. We had this whirlwind romance and tied the knot just 8 months later. It wasn't anything fancy, just a quick courthouse ceremony. She moved in with me since I was renting a decent 2-bedroom house from another one of my uncles, and she was still living with her parents. I met Amber right away, and we've always gotten along fine. But I couldn't ignore how eerily similar Ashley and Amber are. I mean, their personalities are almost the same, except Ashley is a bit more thoughtful with her words, and Amber's got a sharper, sassier edge. But in every other way, they're like carbon copies. They even go out of their way to look identical, same haircuts, same color, and always done on the same day by the same stylist. They've kept this routine their whole lives. On top of that, they do nearly everything together, working out, shopping, eating, you name it. Even their taste in food is so aligned that when we eat out, they order different dishes and split them like clockwork. Their preferences for movies, music, and even guys are practically identical. Amber dated this guy for a year, and honestly, he could have been my brother. Same sense of humor as me, too. He seemed like a decent guy, but when they broke up, I wasn't exactly upset. The whole situation felt weird. Then came the night everything blew up. About a month ago, we had a small party at our place with a few friends, including Amber. I had a bit too much to drink and got pretty tipsy. Ashley wasn't far behind me. As things wound down, I told Ashley I was heading to bed. She said Amber was crashing at our place, which wasn't unusual. If either of them drank too much, they'd stay over at each other's place. But this time, they decided to watch a movie together. I figured they'd pass out from the booze, just like I was about to. I had barely gotten under the covers when Ashley came into the room. She didn't turn on the lights, just slid into bed with me. I asked, "Changed your mind about the movie?" and she simply said, "Yeah," before climbing in. Then I noticed she was completely naked. That was all the encouragement I needed. Things heated up quickly, and we had sex. Afterward, I passed out almost immediately. At around 5 a.m., I woke up needing to hit the bathroom. When I got back to bed, she initiated round 2, which was out of the ordinary, but hey, I wasn't complaining. For context, we don't use condoms because she's on the pill, and I rarely finish inside her unless we know it's safe. But that night, she was insistent I did, both times. The next morning, I woke up around 10, feeling a little hungover but not terrible. Ashley was already up, and Amber had left before I came downstairs. The day was normal. Ashley was unusually affectionate that whole week, which was great but unexpected. She was initiating every night, which isn't unheard of for us, but 3 times in one day. That was new. I just figured she was in a particularly frisky mood. Then earlier today, Amber called me and asked if I could swing by her new apartment to help with something. She and a close high school friend had just moved in together. She said she needed some shelves hung, so I went over. When I got there, though, she admitted she'd made that up. Instead, she handed me a positive pregnancy test. I smiled and said, "Congratulations." Does Ashley know yet? She hasn't mentioned it. I assumed she wanted my help surprising Ashley with the news. But Amber shook her head and said, "No, I haven't told her." I needed to tell you first. I was confused. Why me? I asked. That's when she dropped the bomb. Because you're the dad. From that night at the party. My heart started racing. I stared at her, stunned, and finally blurted out, "What the hell are you talking about?" Amber looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Don't act dumb. We had sex twice that night." I was losing it. "I thought you were Ashley. Why would you do that?" She got defensive, saying, "You were flirting all night, giving me looks. I came into your room to see if you wanted to hang out since Ashley passed out. You didn't seem to mind when I got in bed." I yelled, "I wasn't flirting. What the hell gave you that idea?" She shrugged, saying, "I don't know, you just were. And you didn't hesitate when I got in bed with you. Then we did it again in the morning. I thought you wanted me." I was shaking, barely able to breathe. I told her, "I want a paternity test." "I don't believe you. And I'm telling Ashley what you did. You've ruined everything." Then I stormed out and went straight home. When I got there, I was ready to tell Ashley everything. But as soon as I walked in, she looked so happy it stopped me in my tracks. She said she had some exciting news. I froze, unsure how to proceed. "What's up?" I asked. She sat me down, handed me a pregnancy test, and said, "You're going to be a dad." I froze. I couldn't bring myself to ruin her moment, not yet. I pretended to be thrilled, but inside, I was panicking. I'm planning to tell her everything tomorrow. She deserves the truth. After that, I have no idea what's next. The last couple of days have been some of the hardest of my life. Yesterday, I finally told Ashley what Amber had done to me. She seemed upset, sure, but not nearly as much as I'd expected. Right after I told her, she called Amber. I tried to be there for her and followed her, but she turned to me and said, "I need space." Then she went into our bedroom and locked the door. After about 40 minutes, Ashley came out and said something that left me stunned, "I forgive you." I just stood there, trying to process. "What do you mean you forgive me?" She tricked me into thinking she was you so I'd sleep with her. Amber violated me. Ashley's expression turned sour, like I'd just said something unforgivable. "I can't believe you'd use that word," she snapped. "You weren't assaulted. Amber already told me what happened. And to be honest, I remember you flirting with her most of that night. So, I can't entirely blame her, you were involved too." I was absolutely floored. My blood was boiling. "Are you kidding me? I wasn't flirting with her. What the hell is wrong with you? How can you just brush this off like it's no big deal?" But she didn't back down. "I'm hurt," she said, "but Amber apologized to me. She's my sister, Luke. And maybe I'm partly to blame, I've probably shared too much about us during our girl talks. Amber was worked up, and apparently, you were too. I just want to move past this. I've forgiven both of you, and I think it's best for everyone if we let this go. Harping on it isn't good for me, for my sister, or for the babies. You're about to be a father to both of our kids, and we need you to step up." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I am not the father of Amber's child. This is insane. I can't believe you're taking her side. She took advantage of me, and you're expecting me to just move on? I can't forgive her, and I sure as hell won't forget this. Things escalated quickly. We started shouting, and she ended up yelling that I was going to stress her out so much she'd miscarry. That shut me up, but the damage was done. We spent the rest of the day in complete silence. This morning, I woke up with all of it weighing heavily on me. I can't get past the fact that I was manipulated and used. It's eating me alive. I've always despised cheating, and now my wife's attitude that this is somehow partly my fault has me seriously thinking about divorce. I couldn't let it go, so I decided to file a police report and press charges against Amber. That turned out to be just as awful as everything else. As I sat there explaining the situation to the officer, I could tell he wasn't taking me seriously. He made a few comments suggesting that what happened wasn't a crime, that I should feel lucky, and that my complaint probably wouldn't go anywhere. He said someone would follow up with me later, but his tone made it clear he thought I was wasting his time. When I got home, things went from bad to worse. Amber was there. Ashley had invited her over, and they tried to corner me into some kind of intervention. Both of them started talking about how we needed to work this out and come up with a plan for the babies. I didn't even let them finish. I just shook my head, turned around, and walked out the door. I can't believe Ashley is okay with Amber being in our home after everything. It's like she's completely fine with all of this. I needed to get away, so I went to my uncle's bar and grill. I've been here for hours, just sitting in a booth, trying to clear my head before my shift starts. Honestly, I'm terrified they might show up here to talk. At this point, I've had enough. I think I need to figure out how to end things with Ashley. I can't believe my life has come to this. I've spent the past 2 days holed up in a motel, trying to figure out my next steps. Bridget has been blowing up my phone with calls, voicemails, and texts. Most of her messages are about how worried she is and how much she wants me to come home. The only thing I've replied to was telling her not to come to my workplace. I told her I needed time, and that this entire situation was completely messed up. On the morning of the third day, I got a call from a detective. He told me they had followed up with both Sandra and Bridget, and that no charges would be pursued. He said both of them had given statements claiming that everything was consensual and that I was freaking out because they were both pregnant at the same time. The detective sounded like he was trying to be sympathetic, but it didn't help. If nothing else, you can divorce and move on, he said. Honestly, their stories sound a little too perfect, like they rehearsed it, but it's their word against yours. Unfortunately, it's 2 of them against 1 of you. Hearing that left me furious and defeated. I couldn't take it anymore and went back home. I needed answers. I needed to know why Bridget would side with her sister and lie to the police. When I walked in, Sandra was there. I snapped the moment I saw them together. What the hell is wrong with you two? Lying to the police? You know what happened that night. Bridget immediately tried to calm me down. Babe, stop. Please, just sit down. But I wasn't having it. No. I want her gone, and I want her gone now. Bridget, however, stood her ground. She's not going anywhere. This is what we wanted. I froze. Those words didn't even make sense at first. What do you mean, what you wanted? Why would you want this? Bridget led me to the couch. I hadn't even noticed Sandra quietly slipping out of the room. Bridget sat next to me, held my hand, and looked me in the eye. We've always talked about having kids at the same time. We've dreamed of raising them together, being pregnant together, and this party, it just gave us the chance to make that dream happen. I stared at her, completely dumbfounded. So you set me up. You're just as bad as her. She didn't even deny it. I love my sister, Luke. We do everything together. Having me means having her, too. That's just how it is, and it will never change. I love you, but you'll always come after her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Fine. You can have each other. I want a divorce. At that moment, Sandra reappeared. Don't be like that, she said. I turned on her with every ounce of rage I had left. You can shut the fuck up. Bridget's patience snapped, too. Stop it. You're pissed now, but you'll be even more pissed paying double child support. That was the last straw. Fuck this. And fuck both of you. I'm done. I stormed out of the house and went straight to a divorce attorney. The consultation was brutal. I laid everything out for the attorney, hoping for some kind of plan. After hearing everything, he leaned back and said, honestly, I don't see you coming out ahead on this. The divorce itself is simple since you don't have assets, but the real issue is after. If what you're saying is true, these two are manipulative, and they'll spin this however they need to. You'll likely end up paying child support for both kids. Even if we take this to court, those police statements aren't helping your case. I left the office feeling even more defeated. I don't have much money, and I'd need a better attorney to even have a chance. I decided to talk to my uncles, hoping they'd help. That turned out to be a disaster. They just laughed it off, making tasteless jokes about fucking twins. When I told one of them that Sandra had assaulted me, he sneered, "What are you, gay? Most men would kill to be in your shoes." My last hope was my dad. I called him, praying he'd step up for once in his life. But just like always, he let me down. Defeated and out of options, I went back to the house. Bridget and Sandra were waiting for me, and they asked me to listen to their so-called grand plan. It was worse than I could have imagined. They wanted Sandra to move in with us into the 2-bedroom house we're renting. 3 adults and 2 newborns in one cramped space. They kept saying it would just be temporary, that with 3 incomes we could save up and get a bigger place soon. They actually thought they were doing me a favor, pointing out how I wouldn't have to pay child support or deal with custody battles if I just went along with it. As they talked, they started planning how to decorate the nursery and what baby supplies we'd need, as if I'd already agreed. I've been staying in the house for now, but Sandra is still at her place for the moment. I'm stuck. They've got me backed into a corner. I need to figure out how to escape this mess, but I'm not sure how. Right now, I'm torn between filing for divorce immediately and enduring this nightmare a little longer so I can save enough money to make a clean break. Either way, one thing is clear: I need to get away from these two before they ruin my life completely. It's just a matter of timing. Years ago, my wife Bridget, 29F, and her identical twin sister Sandra, 29F, set me up in ways I never thought possible. Their bond was disturbingly intense, and they tricked me into impregnating them both. What followed was a spiral of manipulation, betrayal, and emotional abuse that destroyed the life I thought I had. I was furious and felt violated, but every time I reached out for help, I was mocked or dismissed. The police couldn't help, the legal system offered no recourse, and even those closest to me either laughed it off or told me to man up. Eventually, the twins got exactly what they wanted. Sandra moved into the house that Bridget and I rented. At first, things felt bearable, or at least manageable. Sandra had her own room, while Bridget and I shared ours. But as the weeks passed, the cracks grew deeper. The twins coordinated everything, from doctor's appointments to setting up Sandra's room as a shared nursery. They insisted on scheduling their C-sections on the same day so their sons would be born just hours apart. Trevor, Bridget's son, and Terrence, Sandra's, were born on the same day, as planned. I tried not to bond with Sandra's child, but when I held him for the first time, I couldn't help but love him. Genetically, the doctor explained, the boys were essentially full siblings due to the twins' identical DNA and my fatherhood. That didn't make it easier for me to accept what had happened, but it solidified that these children, both of them, were mine. Still, my relationship with Bridget was beyond repair. She leaned on Sandra for emotional support, leaving me to navigate a house where I felt more like an outsider than a husband. As much as I hated Sandra, she was always around, always involved. Over time, I stopped fighting it. I gave in to the twisted new norm of my life. Things worsened as the twins manipulated every aspect of our arrangement. They took turns relegating me to the couch, citing the baby's needs or their own desire for space. They soon moved into a routine where one of them would sleep with the boys while the other enjoyed the master bedroom alone. During the day, I became the sole caretaker for both boys. At night, I worked shifts at my uncle's bar. The physical and emotional toll was exhausting, but I loved my sons and treasured the time I had with them. That bond kept me going. A year passed, and then came the moment that fully shattered any illusion of normalcy. One night, Bridget approached me with a request that I could barely process. Sandra was sexually frustrated and needed release. "Could you help her out?" she asked. At first, I refused, but weeks of withholding affection wore me down. When I finally agreed, it was under the condition that nothing would escalate further. Even then, they managed to twist the arrangement, ensuring that I wouldn't finish because it might make things weird. This was the pattern of my life for years. Whenever I hit my breaking point, they manipulated me back into compliance through sex, affection, or occasional treats to remind me of their version of love. Each time, I sank deeper into their control. Eventually, the twins got promoted to managerial positions, and their increased incomes allowed us to move into a larger home. For the first time, I had my own bed and a sense of space. I thought things were finally improving. I was wrong. Just a few weeks after moving, Bridget and Sandra announced they were pregnant again. I felt conflicted but hopeful. They scheduled ultrasounds at the earliest opportunity to determine the sexes of the babies. I asked if we could wait to be surprised, but they dismissed the idea outright. The day of the ultrasound, I wasn't invited. When they returned, they avoided me, saying they didn't want to talk about it. Later that night, I found an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside were the ultrasound results. Bridget was carrying a girl, and Sandra another boy. The next day, I noticed something unusual. Both Bridget and Sandra were home early, clearly uncomfortable. When I asked what was wrong, Sandra casually replied, "We're fine. Just supposed to take it easy for a day." "Take it easy from what?" I asked, growing concerned. Bridget sighed, "Look, don't get all upset, okay? We had to abort." My blood ran cold. "What?" Sandra explained nonchalantly, "They weren't the same sex. They couldn't be twins." Bridget added, "We'll try again next month. Now, please, just drop it." It was like a fog lifted from my mind at that moment. For years, I had been living in this twisted reality they created, manipulated into submission. Seeing them so callously end their pregnancies to fit their bizarre obsession shattered the last thread of control they had over me. I went to my room and let the weight of everything crash down on me. I realized how broken I had become, how much of myself I had lost. For the first time in years, I saw everything clearly. That day, I made a vow. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I would make them pay for everything they had done. It took years of planning, patience, and pretending. But in the end, I finally got my vengeance. And I'm finally free. After Bridget and Sandra terminated their pregnancies because the babies weren't the same sex, I realized I had finally reached my limit. There was no longer any excuse to keep tolerating their manipulation. No amount of financial strain would stop me from getting my retribution. In the days that followed, I confronted them. They brushed it off as no big deal, insisting that we could just try again next month. Their indifference only fueled my determination. That night, I secretly scheduled a vasectomy consultation for the following week. The appointment was just 9 days away, and I made sure they didn't know. When they asked what was wrong, I lied, telling them I had pulled something working out. Step 1 was complete, they could never hurt me again. Step 2 involved a more calculated approach. Bridget and Sandra both got raises after becoming managers. They used the extra income to move into a bigger rental, but I'd already been working nights at my uncle's bar, 5 nights a week. They complained about never going out anymore, which wasn't entirely true. One of them would stay home with the kids while the other went out. To solve this, I proposed switching to part-time, working only Friday and Saturday nights. This would allow me to stay home with the kids more and give them a chance to go out together. I showed them the math and they agreed. Now, I was the primary caregiver, raising Trevor and Terrence full-time. I spent 5 nights a week with them, while Bridget and Sandra enjoyed their new freedom. I kept a log of every night they went out, tracking receipts and bank statements. I let it go on for about a year. 6 months into it, they started trying for another baby, unaware that I'd already had a vasectomy. I knew they would get frustrated, and I was prepared for it. It took them 6 months to finally snap at me. By then, I knew it was time for my final act of vengeance. I had to drive a wedge between the twins. I started by giving all my attention to Sandra, while slowly withdrawing from Bridget. Sandra was initially resistant, but I kept at it. If Sandra brought home dinner, I made it seem like the most thoughtful gesture. If Bridget did the same, I barely acknowledged it, often finding something to complain about. I refused to attend to any of Bridget's needs. No more cuddling, no more listening to her talk. But whenever Sandra needed something, no matter how small, I jumped at the chance to help. Over the months, I watched as the tension between Bridget and Sandra grew. Bridget began to notice that Sandra was receiving all my praise and attention. The change was subtle at first, but it became more obvious. Then, I took it a step further. I got a prescription for Viagra. It wasn't difficult, I simply lied to the doctor about having trouble getting aroused. I had no desire for Bridget anymore, she disgusted me. But I still played my role. Whenever she tried to initiate sex, I'd act uninterested, thinking about everything she had done to me. From her perspective, I just wasn't attracted to her anymore. But whenever Sandra needed release, I'd pop a Viagra, fully engaged, as if nothing had changed. The cracks in their relationship deepened. Bridget changed her hair color, trying to differentiate herself from Sandra. That was when I knew I'd won. With Sandra staying home more often, and Bridget going out more, I knew it was only a matter of time before she started cheating. I kept a close eye on her, watching for the classic signs: late nights at work, excessive phone usage, secrecy. It didn't take long before I had the evidence. Then, I made my move. I told Bridget I wanted a divorce. But I made it clear, I wanted to keep things the same. "I think it's best if we divorce," I said. "I love you, but I'm not in love with you. I think it's time we keep everything as it is, but I'll be married to Sandra instead." She lost it. Bridget screamed and yelled at me, her emotions exploding. Sandra came in to see what was going on, and the tension between the two sisters was palpable. Bridget, completely enraged, turned on Sandra and hit her in the face, knocking out a tooth. Blood splattered across the room as they erupted into a full-on fight. I called the police. They were both taken to the ER and arrested. Bridget had a broken nose, and both women were covered in bruises and cuts. With Bridget's phone left behind, I gathered evidence of her infidelity and our unusual arrangement. I didn't want her coming back and accusing me of cheating. The next morning, their parents bailed them out. I found it ironic and even a little satisfying that they had to spend the night in jail. That week, I filed for divorce, pushing for everything I could: full custody of Trevor and child support for Terrence. I didn't ask for spousal support from Bridget at this point, it didn't matter. The legal battle was long and painful, but I was determined. I quickly found a place of my own and secured a decent daytime job at a lumber company. Though Bridget and Sandra fought me tooth and nail, their divided front worked against them. In the end, I was awarded primary custody of both boys and child support from both of them. I didn't get spousal support from Bridget, but honestly, that was never the goal. Now, I'm looking forward to the future. It's been a long, painful road, and I'm still embarrassed by the choices I made in the past. But I've come out of this stronger, more self-aware, and ready for a new chapter. The sky's the limit from here.